Family, for black empowerment to become a reality, you're going to have to start getting comfortable bullying white supremacy. I didn't say you're going to have to start getting comfortable with the idea of bullying white supremacy. I say you're going to have to get comfortable doing it. Because the problem with telling Negroes get comfortable with the idea of something is they have the concept that, well, that means I need to get comfortable with other people doing it. Black folks have this perennial delusion that somebody else is going to fight for their freedom. Somebody else is going to make the sacrifices required for them to have a better life. And the world don't work like that. You want to know why it is that our oppression has gone on so long? What's the definition of a slave? Someone who waits for somebody else to set them free. You see, the reason that things are getting shook up as far as the elections are concerned is not because black folks were waiting for the civil rights retreads or for clearly white supremacist operatives, black sock puppets for white supremacy like Jesse Jackson or like the NAACP or the Urban League or Mushmouth and Squarejaw, that A-dunce fraud group. We didn't sit around waiting for other people to fight for our freedom. What we did was we presented and promoted a hyper-aggressive agenda, a hyper-aggressive policy that we're going to be getting in the bastards' faces. We're going to be very specific about what it is that we want, but more importantly, as Dr. John Henrik Clarke said, power is not asked for. Power is not given. It's taken. If your voice is to be heard, you do not sit politely and wait for your turn. You stand up, you raise your voice, and when people tell you shh, you let them know, no, you shut up. It is very simple. When it comes to practically any issue, when it comes to practically any sort of organization or gathering, there's typically only going to be one of two outcomes. Only one outcome is actually going to be preferable. Either you are going to have some sort of half-baked decision by committee, which will not be a decision at all. It's going to be a Frankenstein monster of let's have an idea that's got everyone's input. Well, 90% of the people who are putting in their 2 cents ain't got 2 cents worth of sense. So they shouldn't be saying anything at all. And at best, they can only dilute and derange whatever the 10 to 2% of people with some sense actually have to say. So whatever good idea might have come out of your committee is going to be inherently undermined because every Tom, Dick, Harry, Sue, Jane, and Mary who has a half-baked opinion will be allowed to put in their 2 cents, and that'll be the end of the ball game. You'll never actually have a good idea. You'll basically have a nightmare that only had 1 or 2 slightly less repugnant aspects to it. And that's one thing that comes out of having an organization or a group or a gathering that tries to put forward an idea. Running things by committee, which never works. Or the second outcome, which happens to be there is a dominant personality who makes it clear, nah, all this riffraff is going to shut the hell up so that we can get some constructive ideas pushed forward. You see, that's the other one. And organizations that are led and guided by a dominant personality, they tend to be a hell of a lot more effective. If for no other reason than the fact that when there are things that go wrong or things that are not preferable to the group, you at least have somebody who you can point to and say, let's ask that bastard what's going on. You got somebody who's accountable as opposed to your would-be mob rule. I have said for the longest time that black empowerment is not a big tent. There's a whole bunch of fools still talking that stupid talk about, well, we need to have every viewpoint. Why? 98% of the viewpoints are stupid. Oh, we need to have alliances and we need to have unity and we're going to be friends with everybody. Man, to hell with that. Black empowerment is not about having a big tent because the only thing that a big tent is good for is a circus. And the black community has been 3 rings for at least the last 150 years. Well, the show is over. The political and economic sideshow of the former slaves trying to operate according to the dictates of white supremacy, trying to figure out how to take the former oppressors' input and try to find a way to work it into a black empowerment structure. That hasn't worked and it can never work. The system was set up to sustain white supremacy, and the very presence of black people is anathema to white supremacy. They cannot tolerate us in any shape, form, or fashion, which is the reason why they're constantly attacking us. You need to go ahead and make your peace with that. Now, if your goal is, I'm going to be chasing some interracial drawers because I'm such a codependent and I'm so spiritually and morally bankrupt that that's the only thing that gives my existence any meaning, well, that means your existence has no meaning. And if you are so craven and cowardly, if you are such a feckless turncoat that you would decide that you're going to help white supremacy try to pull off some political theater for the sake of misleading us even at this late date, whether it be Simone Aunt Jemima Sanders pretending to protect Joe the Bigot Biden, or whether it be Killer Mike, who I suppose thinks that he's giving street cred to Bernie the Bigot, or BS as I like to call him. Because in Sanders' case, BS ain't just his initials, it happens to speak directly to his character. If you got Negroes who have decided that they're going to run interference for out and out racists like Mike Bloomberg, like the clown who's supposed to be the pastor of Brown Chapel AME in Selma, it's a damn shame, but it's unfortunately a typical predictable shame that these black pastors have absolutely no sense whatsoever. The congregation has more morality. The congregation has more ethics. The congregation has more Christian spirit than the freaking pastor. The pastor, he's the kind of clown who would have handed Christ over to the Romans. But it also says a lot that you got a congregation that has tolerated that pastor for this damn long. First of all, it's very dubious to be having political rallies inside a church to begin with. And second of all, it becomes an abomination and blasphemous when you bring a man whose entire political career, such as it was nothing more than a non-stop litany of anti-black racism. You bring him there for the sake of trying to drum up support for him. There is no justification for that. You can't justify it according to no Bible verse. You can't justify it according to any sort of pseudo-ecumenical teaching. You can't justify it according to anything, because white supremacy and the black bootlicks who collaborate with it, they are completely and thoroughly unjustifiable. What we saw with Mike Bloomberg, what we saw going on the campaign trail, what we did to Kamala Harris, this is what's called for, but we got to step up our efforts. It is not enough simply to speak out against the bastards. It is not enough to give the occasional gesture of defiance. We got to get in their faces. We got to start getting comfortable bullying white supremacy. That's going to be tough for a lot of y'all. Because too many black people have become congenital cowards, and they've taught their children to be cowards, and their parents taught them to hide behind Bible verses. Don't worry about the Bible verses that say you must contend for the faith. Don't worry about the Bible verses that say he who seeks to save his life will lose his life. In other words, cowards are going to be sitting there dying on their knees. Those who stand up for the faith, they're going to be the ones victorious when the dust is settled. You see, there were a lot of things that happened the night that Jesus Christ was arrested by the Romans, but it was Peter who sliced off the Roman's ear. And the Romans, they didn't even bother to arrest Peter. It was like, this dude, he's serious. He's about that life. As soon as they saw that, they said, we'll go ahead and push the rest of these guys around. Stay with that Peter guy, though. Man, he's about it, so we better be careful. You see, as imperfect as Peter's faith was, the fact that he was willing to fight for it, that did not merely preserve his life, it preserved his soul as well. As opposed to Judas Iscariot, who had been a stomped down coward from day one, always hiding in the back whenever trouble showed up. He thought that he would save his life. He lost his life and his soul. Now, black people have to make their peace with the fact that if you are going to actually live on your feet as opposed to crawling around like a cockroach on your knees, you're going to have to get comfortable with the fact that you will have to fight for it, because there's going to be somebody who's trying to test you. Somebody who's trying to give you a gut check. Can I push you around? You got to show them, hell no. Not only are you not going to push me around, now that I've identified you as a threat, I'm going to put you on your knees. Or better yet, belly up. This is the level of determination and resolve that is going to be required of us if we are going to put white supremacy, the greatest evil the world has ever known, into its crypt for all time, never to be seen nor heard from again. So when it comes to these white supremacists who are calling themselves either showing up boldly in front of us and we're going to tell you niggers what it is, or these clowns who are coming to us trying to slither amongst us and trying to sweet talk us into going along with their program, we're going to have to get comfortable bullying them. Bullying is not a bad thing, so long as the individual being bullied deserves it. If you got some white supremacist trying to play the game of, why, I never did anything to you, you never did anything for me either. See, the reason that black people like the idea of certain Bible verses is because they feel as if it gives divine excuse. They feel as if they've got a divine excuse for their cowardice. Well, the oppressors will always give you some sort of pseudo-pious rhetoric, some sort of clearly insincere piety for you to hide behind. Well, the reason I don't fight is because, well, the reason that I'm not standing up to the bad guys, or the reason that I'm not resisting the onslaught of these heathens is because, well, Jesus will fight my battles and the Lord of hosts will fight my... Nah, forget that. There is no instance that you can find in the Bible where you had somebody who actually took the fight to the minions of the devil and God said, oh, I got to punish you. You were wrong. There's plenty of instances where there were individuals who should have done it and got punished when they did not. There are plenty of instances of individuals who decided to compromise with the devil and they got punished for that. So you better start getting comfortable bullying these white supremacists. We have to create, because it doesn't currently exist, but we must create, promote, and we have to embrace and protect, defend a culture of bullying white supremacy. It doesn't matter if you're the only black person in the room. At the end of the day, they got to understand that when we show up, playtime is over. They cannot be allowed to have any safe spaces for white supremacy. No safe spaces for anti-black exclusion. No safe spaces for anti-black racism. You'll go to a rally if it's Hillary Clinton. You'll go to a Bernie Sanders rally. And you'll be hearing this BS and you won't say nothing about it. But if you got an opportunity to show out for some group who you're hoping to get interracial sexual access for, immigrants' rights. If you're here to help out illegal aliens who have never helped you, by the way, then you're willing to go ahead and you're willing to speak up and you're willing to go ahead and make some noise for that. You don't mind disrupting the proceedings for that. You'll climb up the Statue of Liberty for that. You'll get beat up at a Donald Trump rally for that. Well, I'm here because we're trying to stand up to homophobia. Well, you better tell Ed Buck to stop it with the blackophobia. See, we've let the bad guys have a pass, and we keep letting them have a pass. It's okay for them to come to any gatherings that we have, or to try to troll and worm their way into our comment sections. And we've just basically otherwise tolerated, and all viewpoints are welcome here. To hell with that. I don't welcome all viewpoints, because all viewpoints are not worthy. The only viewpoints that I sanction are the viewpoints that say black empowerment now. So if you're one of those people who the only time that you're able to actually stand up at a political rally, the only time you're actually able to make your voice heard whenever these liars are trying to put on some sort of PR stunt, well, if Hillary Clinton pays me, and a lot of those Negroes who you saw at those Donald Trump rallies, they were on the payroll of the DNC. A lot of them paid operatives, but a lot of them were not. A lot of them were just a bunch of attention-seeking Negroes who understood, well, this is where the white media's cameras will be. Malcolm X talked about that over 50 years ago. He said they sent you to World War I and you had blood. You were willing to shed blood in Europe. They sent you to the Pacific to fight the Japanese. You had blood. They sent you to Korea and you had blood. They're preparing to send you to Southeast Asia and you got blood for that. But little black girls being firebombed and people being shot in the streets, and all of a sudden you ain't got no blood. All of a sudden, there's nothing that you're willing to fight for now. All of a sudden you scared you're going to get hurt. What does that tell you? What that tells you is the problem is not fear. Not really. These are Negroes who have a mental block. Mostly they don't have a mind. That's the mental block they're dealing with. Because if you got a mind, what you understand is there is a political reality at work. Black people have got to make it where we are a political insurgency. You're going to have to force the system to do things it was not designed to do. It was designed to exclude you. Hence, you are going to have to condition the bastards that exclusion is not an option. It was designed to marginalize you. I will not be marginalized. It was designed to operate by keeping you in the hinterlands and shutting you out. And you have to make it clear, we will make it where this system is unworkable. We will not allow it to operate. White supremacy believes in subjecting those who it oppresses to a daily breaking process. We must be determined to subject white supremacy to a breaking process. And the problem that a lot of Negroes have is the reason that when it comes time to get called up to the front lines, they got an issue is because most Negroes are trying to find a comfortable place under white supremacy. Let's be bluntly honest, family. We could have toppled white supremacy a long time ago. We didn't have to wait this long. But the problem is a lot of Negroes happen to be morally bankrupt and ethically vapid, and they happen to be spiritually cowardly. It's easier to make excuses for suffering under white supremacy than it is to actually make your peace with the fact that the white supremacists just can't be your friends. You're trying to be friends with these guys, and that just ain't going to happen. Your cowardice, your laziness, your refusal to show the necessary character that is required in order to have what you should have, you might have made your peace with living on your knees, but a lot of us have not. Now, the thing about it is we cannot be in all places at all times. That's impossible. But the thing is there's enough of us now who are on code we don't have to be. Malcolm talked about it 50 plus years ago that white supremacy must face maximum resistance from us. What we saw at Brown Chapel AME, that's supposed to be what happens everywhere. In fact, it's supposed to go beyond that. Whenever BS comes to town, there's supposed to be some black folks in that audience holding up the signs saying, no reparations, no vote. And speaking of votes, there need to be people pointing out, hey, Bernie Sanders voted for the 94 crime bill. Well, I voted for it because of the Violence Against Women Act. That's what it was. No, don't let him white-splain. Because he had been in there for 25 years after the 94 crime bill, Biden's law was passed, and yet you didn't see Bernie Sanders attempting to dismantle all the legislation and the funding that went behind it that helped to create the modern prison industrial complex. Nate Woods was put to death. Nate Woods was murdered. What happened to him, that wasn't some execution. That happened to be a murder carried out by the state. And of course, the two individuals who helped to put in place and fund the murder machine that took the life of Nate Woods. Bernie the bigot hasn't said anything about it. He hasn't spoken up, and neither has Jim Crow Joe Biden, and neither has Simone Aunt Jemima Sanders, and neither has Killer Mike. Isn't Killer Mike going to be raising hell about this? Isn't he going to be saying, man, look at what happened to Nate Woods. This was a murder carried out by the state. And Bernie Sanders, he's going to change these policies now because he knows the second that he brings up that Killer Mike understands the moment he brings up Nate Woods, everyone's going to point and say, wait a minute, didn't this BS guy that you've been palling around with, didn't he vote for the very laws that put the infrastructure in place to take Nate Woods' life? Didn't BS vote for that? And he hasn't done a damn thing to dismantle the killing machine that he helped to construct. So Killer Mike ain't talking about Nate Woods. Oh, but he will say that all of the criticism and the vitriol against BS, it's like what happened to Martin Luther King Jr. Do you know that the scumbag did that? The bastard actually said that. He compared BS to Martin Luther King Jr. You see, this is the reason why you never heard me saying anything complimentary about Killer Mike. What's there complimentary to say? See, the problem with when you have some of these pseudo sophisticated chumps, I'm trying to stay away from using language that would be more direct and more accurate. But when you have these ghetto minded chumps who think of themselves as being sophisticated on some level or another, what they're always looking for is white validation. That to them, they will not have arrived until they get white power to pat them on the head and tell them, you know what, you sure do make sense for a nigger. For a darky. For a person of color. You sure do make sense. Man, you're pretty smart. That's what Killer Mike's looking for. Once he was on with Bill Maher, and I've already told you how racist I think Bill Maher is. After that, as far as he was concerned, he's arrived. See, I ain't one of these mumble rappers. That's what he's thinking. I ain't one of these mumble rappers. I can put a sentence together. I can make my nouns and verbs agree. And the stuff that I talk about, well, yeah, I can speak somewhat cogently on the issues. And what I'm going to say is, this is the reason why you need to vote for the DNC. That's what he's coming up with. And when you point out, I'll vote for the DNC when I see them stop killing black people. When I see them actually fighting to preserve the lives of black people, when I see them actually fighting against the laws that they voted for and put in place, when I see them making recompense to the families of those who they've wronged, and when I see them shutting down and going after the politicians and the policies that have been put in place against us, then we can be talking about some votes. But that has to come first, and Killer Mike is not even putting that requisite out there. Vote for Bernie. Why? Because he's not Donald Trump. Not good enough. Well, Donald Trump, he didn't have a problem with the killing of Nate Woods. That's a distinction without a difference. This is not about who you are going to vote against. This is about who you vote for. And I vote for whomever is going to be dismantling the anti-black prison industrial killing machine. That ain't BS. And it ain't Joe Biden either. And their mouthpieces are not speaking about this. That's how you know that these clowns are bought off. Oh, you thought that Killer Mike was down. He was down for himself. So when I talk about bullying white supremacy, we got to take a no holds barred, absolutely uncompromising stance. Instead of trying to find ways to make excuses for white supremacy and its mouthpieces, we got to be finding ways to get in their faces. Because the bastards will back down, but first we got to show the consistency. This is going to have to be the new normal. This is a brand new political posture for black people to undertake. That political posture is standing up straight. See, we've mastered the posture of bowing and scraping and begging and scratching and shuffling and hiding and ducking. We've mastered that posture. But the posture of power, standing up for ourselves and standing up to the bad guys, that's brand new for a lot of black folks. And it's also unwelcome for them because it carries all sorts of responsibilities, and black folks are forever wanting somebody else to carry their weight, to carry their load. When the history of black empowerment is written, what they want to be able to say is that, oh, this is such a good thing, but what they want to be able to claim that they had some part in it, just so long as they don't actually have to do anything. Oh, Mike Bloomberg can come to my church and well, I want you to know I was glaring daggers at him. I was staring at him, and I'm telling you, I stared him down while he was giving that speech. I didn't do anything, didn't say nothing. But I was staring him down. Oh, I was staring daggers at that man. And I was staring daggers at the pastor too. He was wrong. Oh, he was wrong. That's what black people try to do. They try to take their cowardice and dress it up as being some sort of moral defiance, when the truth of the matter is it's plain old garden variety craven cowardice. Black empowerment is going to require you to get in the enemy's face. Black empowerment is going to require you to disrupt, dismantle, and defy the operatives and the operations of white supremacy. We are going to have to make sure that any time that there's some sort of gathering, A, we are there, B, our interests are heard, because we have to make it clear. We got to condition them. We have to condition them as soon as this meeting is called to order, here we go. We are going to be part of this conversation, not because we ask for permission to speak, but because of the fact that we're going to be raising holy hell. Now, I'm not telling you to grab a megaphone or to otherwise get some pots and pans and start banging them. But what I am telling you is that we have every right and a duty to make sure that this sick system of white supremacy is bent to our will. But that will require force. It will require force of personality, among other things. But you have got to show that we are here to mess up the program, because the program right now is white supremacy. It is white supremacy all day. Well, we're here to mess up the program. We're not going to let it be business as usual. You want to know why it is that Cynthia Erivo is damaged goods? It's because black folks raised their voices about her, but more importantly, started confronting the people who were behind that abomination trying to portray itself as a Harriet Tubman movie when it was nothing more than a white supremacist fraud. When you start getting in the face of people like Deborah Martin Chase and letting them know it ain't just Cynthia Erivo, you think that because you're a producer, black folks don't know who you are. And even if they do, nobody's going to call you out. And she found out both would happen. We know who she is. And the thing about it is she can get that work too. She can get that work too. When the operatives of white supremacy start actually being resisted, when they start getting pushed around by us, they're going to be in a position that they haven't been in, where the former slaves start throwing their weight around. And we start demonstrating to white supremacy exactly how sharp our minds, our tongues, and our elbows are. Bullying white supremacy is not merely a matter of having some sort of lively disdain for the bad guys. It's a matter of this is war. And a key component, one of the baseline elements of all warfare, is to disrupt enemy operations. Right now, they're putting forward the fraud, and every time black people are silent, when we don't actually resist, when we don't speak up, when we do not decide to throw some monkey wrenches into the gears, what happens is they get to put forward the lie that, there's black support for Bloomberg. How you figure that? Well, because Pastor Porkchop over here invited him to speak in Selma. Selma was where John Lewis, I spilled blood in Selma. John Lewis went across the Edward Pettus Bridge with Dr. King, and well, you see, these guys are giving their blessing to him, so Bloomberg is all right. And there's some black pork chop mayors, some political prostitutes in Houston, and they all converge, just a whole bunch of traitor mayors calling themselves black leaders. And they're calling themselves voting, saying that they endorse Mike Bloomberg. Wonder how much that cost. And you see, he's got black support. Yeah, he had black support until black people showed exactly how little support he actually had. When black folks turned their backs on him, they also turned the Bloomberg campaign to dust. And those black mayors that Bloomberg paid off, and that black pulpit pimp who decided to open the doors of the house of God to the devil himself, all of them were powerless. Bloomberg is a $60 billion man. He put $500 million into his campaign, and it was taken down in a single day by people who didn't even run one political ad. People who did not raise $1 million or even $1,000, truth be told. See, that's what happens when black people are merely doing this with no resources committed to the field. But understand something, that's good enough as a tactic. It's good enough to swat away the latest white supremacist operative of the moment. But that kind of feeble effort, and we need to see it for what it is, as nice as it is to see when it comes to taking down white supremacy, it is feeble by comparison. We got to put our shoulder to the wheel. Now, the breaking of Mike Bloomberg, that simply demonstrates that it can be done, but it won't be done until we put everything into it. This is all hands on deck. Whenever these clowns call themselves coming to your town, you need to make sure that you are there. Whenever they're holding some sort of town hall, you need to make sure you are there. You want to know why Deborah Martin Chase's raggedy ass has been MIA ever since November? It's because some black folks got in her grill. White supremacy looked at Cynthia Erivo and was like, oh, we're going to cut this little nigger short. Her career is pretty much done at this point. The niggers have spoken up. They're not going to be misled by her. Nobody's going to be following her. They've delegitimized her. Had to find another tool. Here comes Izzy or Lizzie or Lizzo, whatever the hell her name is, that Yorkshire hog. Yeah, it seems like there's a ready supply of Negroes who will gladly do whatever garbage they think they can get away with, as long as they get a pat on the head from Massa. Last week it was Tiffany Haddish. Yesterday it was Cynthia Erivo. Today it's Lizzo. Tomorrow it'll be some other clown. We know that white supremacy always has a few clowns and morons who are willing to engage in any sort of anti-black racism just for some butter biscuit crumbs. You ain't even got to give them the whole biscuit. As long as there's some crumb and a little residue from the butter, that's good enough for them. They'll sell black people as an entire race. They'll sell us up the river just for a few crumbs. Just a couple of days ago, I had posted on my Twitter feed that there was this... I'm not entirely sure how to classify this individual. She's supposed to have some black ancestry, though apparently she's mixed. I didn't say mixed up, but mixed. And she wrote an article saying that pictures of Asians in masks should not be the, quote, face of the coronavirus. First of all, whenever I've been seeing people walking around in public with face masks on, it's usually been Asians, whether it's been in China because of the air pollution, whether it's been in North Korea and Japan, because they've always been very concerned about the idea of airborne contaminants and viruses and such, and don't want to catch anything from people. So people have already been conditioned to think that Asians in these countries run around with face masks already. So why this partially black woman would feel that she's somehow heading something off? She's only about 25 years too late. But this woman, who shall go unnamed, you can read her rantings and her idiotic scribblings if you want. But she also has written other articles for other websites that you don't need to bother with. And one of the things that she admitted to was that she suffers from a mental illness. You don't say. But I'm not being facetious here. She actually wrote that she does deal with mental illness and is someone who grapples with mental illness and her condition and such and blah, 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 blah. And I'm sitting here going, well, that pretty much says it all. As black people, we have white supremacy presenting to us individuals who not only have a lack of character, but in many cases, they have a lack of their cognitive faculties. These are individuals who are psychologically unbalanced, but this is who white supremacy is giving a platform to. This is who white supremacy is pushing the views of, and the views are actually those handed to them by white supremacy. And then you wonder why it is we got so many zaddy worshipers and so many of these clowns who are sniffing whatever Becky's drawers they can find. You got a lot of these clowns who either have a mental illness or they're undiagnosed with something. They're running around and have yet to have a diagnosis performed. But that's something you need to keep in mind. A lot of these individuals are not psychologically stable. So when you see them sitting here giving these suicidal, genocidal rantings, you are literally hearing from the mouths of madmen. These are not individuals who actually give a dang about black people because they're not mentally stable. These people are unhinged. Not because I said so, but because they said so. And these are the same individuals who will tell you to go vote for Bernie. And when you say, well, I got to have some tangibles first, he's going to have to make it clear when the checks go out. I don't want to hear about you ain't got no $16 trillion. You're sitting here planning bailouts for white college kids. And you're planning some damn to die aborting medical scheme. Call it Obamacare 2.0. While you're busy planning this garbage that ain't going to produce a damn thing, you need to be worrying about something that actually will produce results. When fully 1/7 of the U.S. population is made economically whole again, that's going to change everything. Because not only is it going to be an enormous infusion of cash directly into the system, but it's also going to be building up and going to be reinforcing an economic underpinning that's going to bootstrap the economy for hundreds of years to come. But the thing is, white supremacy is not concerned about crumbling infrastructure. White supremacy is not concerned about schools that are being defunded. They're not concerned about a failing, any sort of the social, societal failings that you see around you. White supremacy is not concerned with that. As far as they're concerned, these are just the necessary growing pains of getting that white supremacist super state back on track. Because one of the things that I also posted on my Twitter feed was that you got a bunch of white supremacists who consider themselves to be accelerationists, as they call themselves. And what does that mean? You have this one white supremacist extremist group, Atomwaffen. These are out and out terrorists. And they consider themselves to be part of that white supremacist accelerationist movement. And what accelerationist means is they have already written off Western, read white civilization and society. They've already written off Western civilization as it stands today. As far as they're concerned, they do not wish to see Western civilization preserved. They want to help hasten its collapse. So that's the reason why you got the Dylan Roofs and the alt-rights and all the rest of these clowns. That's the reason why these guys are going hog wild. As far as they're concerned, they want to have chaos. They want to bring the system down because as they see it, a white supremacist superstate, a newly reinvigorated, I should say, because this country has spent every day of the last 243 years as a white supremacist state. There has not been one moment in the last 500 years that this country has not been ground zero for white supremacy. So it's not a matter of a white supremacist state will be established. What they want is to reinforce a newly reinvigorated white supremacist state, because the one they got right now, as far as they're concerned, is not brutal enough. This white supremacist state apparently isn't supreme enough. So that's what the bad guys are doing. They're trying to accelerate the fall of what they see as a weak white supremacist state. And in the midst of chaos, they think if there's enough chaos, that will give them plenty of cover so they can put in place what they really want. And you won't be seeing Killer Mike fighting against that. And Pastor Porkchop down at Brown Chapel AME Church, he ain't going to be fighting against it either. But you know what? I am not fighting for the well-being of a Killer Mike. I am not fighting for the well-being of pulpit pimps. I am fighting for the well-being of intelligent black society, the B1, the former slaves who got their heads on straight, and our progeny. That I am fighting for. But this is a war that cannot be won by one man or one voice. This war is the responsibility and the duty of us all. This is not a war that will be conducted with guns or bombs or tanks or planes. But it will be fought in the streets, in the halls of government. It will be fought anywhere where ideas are pushed and promoted. We are going to wage war on the satanic idea of white supremacy. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to delegitimize it. As I pointed out to you, once you have delegitimized something, you can do anything to it. You can shuffle it to the side. You can put it in a broom closet. You can destroy it. And that's the reason why you don't have any of these candidates who are talking about how we need to punish anyone who decides that they're going to carry out stop and frisk. The first thing that should come up, if somebody claims that, oh, well, I've got problems with some of these criminal justice laws, first thing you should be pointing out is, well, what is your proposed Justice Department going to do to punish these DAs and these attorney generals? What are you going to do at the federal level to punish the Kamala Harrises and to punish the Tim McGinty's and to punish the Dan Donovans, and the Tim McCulloughs, and I'll be here till 5 a.m. listing them all. What are you going to do to punish them? Of course, that never comes up and never will, because the idea is to always talk around the issue. And you think because they said stop and frisk and they gave a tisk to it, that means that they disapprove. No, what it means is they're trying to figure out whether or not you'll see the okie doke, that they didn't actually say what they were going to do about it. Because see, when it comes to trying to go after black people, they got ideas for laws and put them laws on the books, because we may not have gotten Cosby put away for life necessarily, but don't worry, we'll bring another prosecution against him as soon as he gets out. If he does get out of prison, we'll have another lawsuit waiting for him. We'll have another prosecution waiting for him. See, they will go ahead and make sure that there's punishment for that. But for the murder of Nate Woods, what punishment is there going to be? And you cannot be timid about your power. You cannot be light-footed about your power. You cannot afford to be soft-spoken about your power or to try to make people happy. The folks who actually get what they want are the ones who raise holy hell about it. Because that is how you make it where this is going to be heard. That's how you make it where if you want me to shut up, there's a very easy solution. Do as I say. There have been a lot of you who for the last dozen years now have asked, what can I do? Well, one of the things that you can do is what those brothers did in Austin, what they did to Deborah Martin Chase. That's one of the main things that can be done. White supremacy relies upon the use of lying images. And when they got a room full of people and nobody's saying nothing, nobody's doing nothing, the white supremacists get to push the idea that, see, this is the mainstream. This is the mainstream. This is what it's all about. Reparations was a fringe issue until the black grassroots made it where the bastards had to actually say something about it. And a lot of you were sitting there trembling quaking in your boots. Oh, if they say reparations, this is going to be what they said. They're going to say they're never going to do it. The only person who actually said there's no way I'll go for reparations is BS. Killer Mike's best friend. All the other candidates, they said reparations. Well, actually, yeah, reparations. But we wanted to define what reparations is. So it's not a matter of scared to say the term. The problem is the former slaves have been too timid and too scared to push our interests. But whenever we do, the white supremacists back down. But whether or not they're going to back down and stay down depends on how hard we push. You need to get used to the fact that you're going to have to bully white supremacy. In fact, you should look forward to it. For a dozen years, a lot of you have been asking, what can I do? I'm telling you right now, this is something you can do. This is something you can do. Don't let the bastards get away with this fraud, this con. Wherever one of these scumbags shows up at, there's supposed to be somebody who's got their head on straight who makes it very clear. We're bullying white supremacy. We're going to bully you because we're going to make it clear to everybody. The reason that the orange man is going to remain in power, the reason that the left arm of white supremacy is going to be powerless for a while is because the former slaves have rendered it powerless. And just like with Kamala Harris, just like with Pete Buttigieg, just like with Mike Bloomberg, the white media will try to put up a brave front that, oh, things are going on business as usual, and, oh, Pete Buttigieg is rising in the polls, and the bump is real, and, well, Mike Bloomberg's stop and frisk policy is not hurting his black support. Why, he's got black support despite stop and frisk. And, well, Bernie Sanders is gathering more black voters, and, oh, Joe Biden, oh, he's got that massive black support. They're going to continue telling that lie. They're going to continue telling it until it collapses. Kamala Harris had a secret weapon. In fact, she had two secret weapons, as the white media called it. Apparently, she had a whole secret arsenal. Must have been one hell of a secret because she never actually used it. But her DA past, her prosecutor resume, the fact that she's a prosecutor, oh, she knows how to handle herself on a debate stage. Kamala Harris's secret weapon is her prosecutorial past. What they were doing was the white media was trying to low-key cheerlead for her and to point out that being a prosecutor is a good thing. See, the fact that she's a prosecutor, that's what makes her so effective on the debate stage. And she's going to be really good at taking on Donald Trump because she'll be able to interrogate Donald Trump. Don't worry about all the black people who she locked up wrongly. Don't worry about all the white supremacists who've murdered black people that she refused to prosecute. Don't worry about any of that. Don't worry about every white supremacist who got a slap on the wrist courtesy of Kamala Harris when she was DA of San Francisco and Attorney General of California. Don't worry about that. Instead, let the white media tell you that her being a prosecutor is a good thing, because the white media understands you have an apparatus of anti-black racism in place. And the operators of that apparatus, well, you got to make it where people don't look at them and see them as the bad guys. So, oh man, prosecutors have been taking a pasting because of Kamala Harris. Being a prosecutor is a dirty word. Well, we got to find a way to get black people off of that. Look, well, instead of telling them that Kamala Harris needs to be punished, instead what we'll say is that her being a prosecutor, that's a secret weapon. Yeah, a secret weapon that's going to be used only for her benefit because she damn sure has never used her prosecutorial acumen for the benefit of black people. I did an entire video essay too, in fact, The Deadly Deception of Kamala Harris and the Fall of Kamala Harris, showing you the entire rundown of what this woman didn't do for black people. Though I can show you plenty of what she did to black people, but not a damn thing that she did for us. But that's the kind of Jedi mind trick the white media is going to be intensifying its efforts to do. Don't see Kamala Harris as part of the problem. Why, she's part of some solution because she's a prosecutor trying to rehabilitate the fact that this woman spent her entire career as one of the bad guys. But it didn't work. And Pete Buttigieg, well, he's gay, and that being the case, well, it means that he's practically black himself. Now, doesn't that mean he's exactly the same thing? Let me tell you something. When Oscar Grant was murdered in San Francisco, or rather Oakland, you had all those homosexuals, all those LGBT folk in San Francisco. They didn't raise holy hell about it. They didn't say, wait a minute here. We're fellow minorities in the struggle. All of those white LGBT folk and a lot of the non-white ones, they were not rioting for Oscar Grant. They did not say, you know what, we're a huge part of the tax base here, at least a significant part. We happen to have some stroke. We happen to be politically, economically organized, and the fact that this young man was murdered with impunity, we're going to make it where if this guy who did this doesn't get the max, then we're going to be running a lot of prosecutors and a lot of judges and a lot of mayors out of office. Because we're brothers in the struggle. You see, we're all fellow minorities here. And what threatens one of us threatens us all, right? Right? Isn't that the spiel? It's the spiel that black people get whenever one of these other non-black minorities wants us to do something for them. Hey, Donald Trump is rounding up illegal aliens. We're all in this together. Okay, Lupe. Hey, you happen to have some of those states who are running around trying to ban gay marriage, or they're trying to pass some other rule that the LGBT community doesn't like. Well, you know, this is no different. The discrimination against gays and transgenders and such is no different than what black people went through. No, that you must be reading a totally different history book. One that you invented in the last 5 minutes. Because the real history books, the one that I got, ain't no comparison. That's a false comparison. We won't let it stand. See, whenever other groups want something, they have no problem pointing to us and saying, we're all in this together. You know, black people, you know, what threatens one of us threatens us all. Then when black people say, hey, you got resources, you also got connections, what threatens one of us threatens us all, and while you're at it, what about Ed Buck? All of a sudden, crickets. So no, Pete Buttigieg does not have any credibility in my eyes. This guy was covering for the killings of black folks. But the white media tried to make it seem like he was on the rise, when the truth of the matter was he was about 5 seconds away from throwing in the towel. And I've already told you about Mike Bloomberg, just got through doing a video about how the white media had to bust a 180 in 24 hours flat. Mike Bloomberg went from stop and frisk being no problem for his black support to stop and frisk ran him out of the race. The white media is lying, and they know that they're lying, but what they also know is they have not really been made to pay a price, and the black people who they've been telling these lies to and telling these lies about have not confronted them on it until now. That's the reason why it's important that we call out these liars, the Agent Duvernays, and the Mark Lamont, you big dummy Hills, and all the rest of these fakers, frauds, phonies, and fools. It's important that these bastards hear from us. It is important that we get in their faces. It is important that whenever they decide that they're going to slither out from whatever rock they've been hiding under and they come out in public, here we are to let them know now about what we were telling you about online. That is important. There is nothing out of line. There is absolutely nothing discourteous or wrong or inappropriate about you confronting the minions of white supremacy. There is nothing inappropriate about you bullying white supremacy. There is nothing wrong with you bullying white supremacy. White supremacy should be bullied because white supremacy is the most evil system the world's ever seen. And it's time for white supremacy to be shoved into the lockers and not let out. It's time for white supremacy to see us walk up to it and take its lunch money and tell it when I show up tomorrow, I better not have to take it from you. You better just drop it off. It's time for white supremacy to be thoroughly and completely intimidated. It's time for white supremacy to get put in a headlock. It's time for white supremacy to have its head shoved into the toilet. Whether it's been flushed first or not is truly irrelevant. Because as this becomes the new status quo and white supremacy understands that it can look forward every day to the former slaves bringing it in for some abuse, what you're going to see is not going to be some heightened status quo of incivility. No. When you decide that you're going to throw your weight around against the most evil system the world has ever seen, that is not something that encourages incivility or encourages bullying. In fact, it does the opposite. Bullying white supremacy is how you create civility. Bullying white supremacy is how you lead to a kinder, gentler society. Bullying white supremacy is simply another word for justice.